In the second part of today's presentation, we're going to have a little bit of culture from Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory has 6 divisions. Research is only one of them, and you heard before about the DNA Learning Center, which is another division for high school and middle school education around the world. Today we're going to hear from Dr. Rebecca Leshan, who's the Executive Director of our Banbury Center. She received a PhD in molecular and integrative physiology from the University of Michigan and conducted postdoctoral research at Rockefeller University, where she worked on neural mechanisms controlling weight and arousal. Prior to joining Banbury, she was had an interesting job actually promoting the United Kingdom government's science and innovation network in the United States. And she worked for the UK government for a number of years before coming to Banbury in 2016. And I hope you'll learn that the Banbury Center is one of the real unique gems of science in the world.
So I'm so pleased to be talking to you today about the Banbury Center, although Zach is always a hard act to follow. I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of background about the center, and then I'm going to tell you a couple of stories of some particularly impactful meetings. So as both Bruce and Ron described, the Banbury Center is kind of a special place that's part of the lab. We consider it a sort of science think tank. We convene small groups for discussion meetings. The talks are all kept quite short so that the participants can have a lot of time to talk to each other. We do have a confidentiality policy, and that's really about ensuring that everyone in the room can share new work and speak openly and challenge each other in ways that they may not otherwise. So our meetings span usually about 2.5 days, and during that time, everyone stays on our estate on the North Shore of Long Island. The participants, I mentioned it was a small group. We typically have about 25 to 30 total participants. The makeup of those participants will vary quite a bit depending on the meeting topic, but I have some general data from all of our meetings last year, and this shows that we really heavily skew towards academic participants. We're not quite gender balanced yet, but we're getting there, and our participants are largely based in the US, and we still are waiting to have a participant from Antarctica. So the meeting topics will really vary quite a bit. We don't have a lot of repeating meetings. At their core, they're all based in the biosciences, but they span really crunchy basic science questions all the way through heavily policy-based issues or education topics. I've listed a few examples of our recent meetings. You can always find the agendas from our meetings on our website, and I've included the address in the bottom corner. You can also look back at old annual reports to see full agendas from past meetings. Typically, meetings center around at least one of the following objectives. There may be an area, whether it's an existing field or an emerging field, that's facing a challenge or needs some sort of strategy to move forward. And so a lot of times groups are getting together to talk about the challenges and potential ways to overcome those. One of the great things that we're able to do here is to bring people together who wouldn't otherwise be connecting because they're working in quite different sectors or fields or otherwise not meeting each other at large conferences. And so a core objective is just to share knowledge across those divides to make that connection. We also hope we're stimulating collaborations that will take place once everybody has left the estate. And in the case of policy issues, we're often trying to build consensus. So when we think about what happens once the meeting is over, what are people taking away both individually and how are we impacting the scientific community more broadly? I'm going to show some information from some participant surveys we took, and these are for participants after 2 years after the meeting they've attended or 5 years. So as we would hope, the majority said they gained new knowledge. There was one person that said they absolutely did not learn anything new at a meeting, but otherwise everyone's at least walking away with new knowledge. And they've been able to apply it to their work, so that's wonderful. As I mentioned, an important point about Banbury is bringing together people who wouldn't otherwise meet. And so we had a majority of people indicate that they made new contacts outside of their existing networks. So we consider that a great outcome of a meeting. And people go on to form collaborations. 75% or 77% of participants reported this. While we do have that confidentiality policy to allow some of the discussion in the room, we really want to make sure that the conclusions and the meeting topic, the discussions, are getting out to the broader community, the scientific community and the public. And so we were pleased to see that more than half of participants said that the meeting resulted directly in a publication that shared that information. Now, I should remind you that these are participants who attended meetings starting 2 years ago. And I think in that time, in recent years, we've really increased the number of meetings that produce some sort of report or publication. And I'm showing you a few recent examples of those. It's a wonderful way to keep the discussion moving into the broader community. We'd always hope that our meetings lead to a policy change, and that's because it has the potential to impact a lot of people. So we were very happy to see that nearly half of the participants surveyed said that the meeting directly contributed to a policy change. One of those meetings is in 2016, a meeting focused on diagnostics for Lyme disease. Now, if you're not living in a place that is a Lyme disease hotspot or haven't traveled to one and known to bring your bug spray, Lyme disease is a common tick-borne disease here on Long Island. And the difficult part is that it can be hard to diagnose, and if it's not treated, you can have a lot of long-term health issues. So the standard test started with an enzyme immunoassay, and depending on the results of that test, you would have a second test, an immunoblot, or you would be considered negative. The challenges there are that in the first few weeks of infection, there's a really low sensitivity to that EIA, and so you can get a false negative result. On the second tier test, there's also some complications with interpreting that immunoblot, so that makes the diagnosis a little bit more complicated as well. The other factor is that typically, if you don't see the actual tick biting you, you don't pull it out, or you don't see the bullseye rash that typically comes with a bite, but not always, you may not know when you've been bitten or that you've been bitten at all. And so the symptoms you're exhibiting, which might be headache, muscle aches, fatigue, you're not necessarily attributing them to Lyme disease and asking for a test. So this meeting aimed to look at the current methods for diagnostics and think about ways to improve those. It also wanted to look at potential for new strategies that could overcome some of those challenges. The group included academic researchers, companies that were developing diagnostics, and importantly, it also included members of the US government who played a role in changing those regulations. So the group's first paper came out the year after the meeting in 2017, and this paper recommended improving the current testing method by either adding in new so-called next-gen EIAs or doing a single multiplex assay. And the second paper came out a year later, and this one pushed it even farther and said, let's try a new paradigm. Let's move to PCR-based tests, which could overcome some of those low sensitivity issues in the early weeks. We were really pleased that the following year, last year in 2019, the FDA and CDC both updated their guidelines, now allowing this 2 EIA approach that was described in the first paper. And so this is going to make a big difference in diagnosis for a lot of people across the world. And we're hoping that the next shift we see is trying some of these new direct methods. So that's a relatively recent meeting that had impact rather quickly. I want to talk about another meeting that you may have heard about. This one was much longer ago and had a huge impact, and we're really proud of it. So I always love the chance to talk about it. And this one dealt with the use of DNA in forensics. So in the 80s, the use of DNA in investigations and in criminal justice was increasing really rapidly. So from the first publication of a DNA profiling test by Alec Jeffreys in 1985, you immediately started to see it being used in investigations and being introduced into court. I do want to stop here and say that all of the meeting that I'm about to describe was spearheaded by my predecessor, Jan Witkowski. And so while I'm telling the story, he led the meeting and all of these efforts. So as I mentioned, this meeting was convened. This was a year after the DNA evidence was first introduced into courts. This was 1988. And the group consisted of scientists, attorneys, other legal experts, including a judge, law enforcement, and scientists working in law enforcement labs or in the independent testing companies that were conducting these tests. What was really important was that there were 2 attorneys in particular who attended the meeting, and they're shown here, Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld. They had just taken on a case defending Joseph Castro. And this was going to be a case where DNA evidence was potentially going to be admitted. And so they did not show up to the meeting empty-handed. They brought the actual evidence, the films from the case. And after the meeting had been going on, there had been a lot of discussions of the use of this technique, of different analyses. And so they pulled out the autorad and showed it to Eric Lander, who was one of the participants. And he put the autorad, as you can see, up against the window that's just behind me. And he called the scientists over and said, "What do you think?" And so they looked at it and they saw contamination, they saw degradation, and you can see on the screen, they essentially concluded that it was garbage. So this story could have just stopped there and still had big impact. Defense attorneys, who usually don't have access to the top scientists in their cases, had this new insight that the DNA evidence shouldn't be admitted. They could go back and argue this, the prosecution would counter, and that would be the end of the story. But it wasn't, because the defense and prosecution scientists after the meeting got together. They were so troubled by what they had seen, and they issued a statement that said, essentially, this evidence is garbage and should not be admitted. This turned out to be quite a landmark case. So this is the People versus Castro, and it has been cited quite a bit since. So this was the first time the admissibility of DNA evidence was questioned based on the scientific rigor. And in this case, the judge, after days of testimony, hearing all of the science, all of the arguments, rejected the evidence in the pretrial hearing. He also outlined criteria for admitting DNA evidence in the future, and it was a somewhat modification of an existing standard, but it has been used quite a bit since. And it was important because it said that the standards of academic research science should also be applied to forensic science. But it didn't stop there. The statement that those scientists wrote also said, this is not an issue that's confined to this particular case or this courtroom. We need the National Academy of Sciences to form a commission to look into this. And they did that. And so in 1992, the National Research Council's DNA Technology and Forensic Science report came out, and there have been several other reports and updates since then. But it didn't stop there, because those two defense attorneys that I mentioned at the beginning, Peter Neufeld and Barry Scheck, went on to form the Innocence Project, which is an organization that works to overturn wrongful convictions and free those who have been imprisoned. And as of 2020, the Innocence Project has supported 375 individuals who were exonerated based on DNA evidence. And that totals more than 5,000 years served in prison, with 21 of those individuals having served time on death row. And you can see the photo is actually just from last week, the most recent exoneration, a man who was in prison for nearly 40 years set free. And so, you know, that's a huge impact stemming from a single meeting at the Banbury Center, which we think is quite historic. And of course, you know, the discussions about DNA use in forensics continue, and I just want to point out that even as recent as last year, we convened a meeting that looked at the new use of genetic genealogy databases in law enforcement investigations and some of the ethical issues that come with that. So, you know, spanning decades, we're trying to pull together people to continue to think about these issues. So I'll just end by thanking everyone who actually does the work to help get people here to convene the meetings and to make everybody's stay productive. All of my colleagues listed at the top. I want to give a special thanks to the funders of our meetings, who without those individuals and organizations' support, we wouldn't be able to bring people to Banbury to have those important discussions. And finally, I want to thank the Robertsons. Charles Robertson donated his estate to the lab in the 1970s, and that's literally the reason that we're able to be here today. So I will end there.
Thank you, Rebecca. Wow, it's amazing to see the far-reaching impact that meetings can have on the community. It's a very insightful talk indeed. Thank you. Let me ask you this. So due to safety reasons during the current pandemic situation, a lot, in fact, almost all our events, conferences, workshops, seminars, pretty much everything have moved to a virtual mode. So what about Banbury? Have you guys conducted any virtual events this year?
So that's I'm not going to give you a direct answer. The overall answer is no. We haven't had traditional Banbury meetings that have fully converted to virtual. And that shows the importance of the specific style of meeting. So when people stay for a Banbury meeting, they're having discussions during the formal sessions, but then they're also having informal discussions over dinner while taking a walk. You know, they're confined on the estate and they're focused on each other and the topic. That really doesn't translate to a virtual format, because we also have a lot of people from all over the world. We would have issues convening for any length of time virtually in different time zones. What we have been doing is convening shorter, almost a part of a meeting to start some discussions with a smaller group, or with meetings that have already happened to reconvene to do some quick updates. So one example is we convened a meeting last year focused on digital mental health tools. Little did we know that being able to access mental health care digitally or virtually would become really important a year later as everybody was confined to their homes and dealing with grief. And so we reconvened that group to talk about what are some new issues that have arisen, you know, how do we want to take the trajectory we were on with outputs of that meeting and think about how things have changed and some new issues that have come up. So we've convened a little bit, but the traditional meeting is not able to be transitioned to virtual.
Yeah, I agree. While the virtual meetings do offer flexibility and some other pros, the in-person interaction, which I guess makes all these meetings so effective, is definitely lacking. So our next question is from Min Yao, and I'm just going to read out her question. So Min wants to know if the Banbury meetings are invitation only, or is it open to applicants?
So it is invitation only, and saying that always sounds a little exclusive to me, or like we're trying to exclude. The invitation only part is really because we have a limited space. So we have physical constraints about how many people can meet. And then there's also the constraint about how many people can make up a productive discussion. And we want to make sure we're including a lot of different types of people and different perspectives represented. So it's invitation only because we're really curating that list of those who are invited to say, you know, we need someone with an expertise in health economics, and we also need a really great developmental neuroscientist. So on the other hand, if we know about your work, if you reach out, if you have an idea for a meeting, if you connect with us otherwise, you know, then you're sort of on the radar. We know what your expertise is. So sometimes we may reach out to organize a meeting with you. So in that sense, there's some two-way, but yes, we are invitation only.
Great. I guess we'll take our last question for the day from Jason. Jason, go ahead, please.
Okay, hi. Thank you. It was a very interesting story. I was wondering if there's another resource somewhere online maybe where we could learn about the meetings and more about the history of Banbury, because that was very interesting.
Yes, so we do have a bit of the history on the website. I think there's an actual tab at the bottom called History. And we do have the past agendas in the annual report, so you can see the meetings there. We are working to do more on getting some of the stories of these meetings and the outputs posted together. Right now, we're limited to that history tab in the agendas or reports tab. There's also some, I think there's a link for some classic meetings. So the ones that have been particularly impactful, we have maybe 2 pages describing the meeting.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca. And I think with that, we would like to close today's session. Once again, we'd like to thank Professor Stillman, our speakers, Zach and Rebecca, for the wonderful talks, and also our audience for joining us today. We encourage you to go ahead, join the Slack channel to continue the discussion on today's talks. Next week, Life Sciences Across Globe will feature our sister institute, UBA CONICET, and we will hear talks from Anna Belen Elgarzen and Mario Picheni. Do join us. Thank you.